Hello, and welcome back to Sinister Sisters.
Hello.
It's Sinister Sunday,
Woo.
and it's my Sinister Sunday this week.
I'm in a chaotic mood right now.
Kat is overtired.
I am well overtired.
So, we're gonna speed run our way through this episode so Kat can have a nap.
I slept on an air mattress last night and it deflated halfway through the night, and the friends that we were staying with have cats, and Nova was there, and Nova, like, every time the cat would move, would be like, hello! So,
Friend!
you know, just Nova things. Anyway.
Nova's their dog. I don't know. We've mentioned it before, but they might not have seen that episode, so.
Yes.
She's
My
our
dog.
producer.
She is. She's very good at it. A+ editing skills for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, today we are talking about the Columbine school shooting.
Interesting.
From 1999. This case, I guess it's not like this episode is going to be quite heavy, I think, and just relatively hard to listen to because it's not like school shootings are anything of the past in America. They're still very prevalent in most places in America. So keep that in mind when you're choosing if and how you will consume this episode. And if this is one that you have to skip, then that is fair. That is
see you later,
super
friends.
fair.
Yeah. Our feelings will not be hurt.
Not at all. The specific content warnings for this episode include school shootings, gun violence, death of young people, suicide, and racism. So, let's get into it.
Okay. I'm just thinking how, sidebar, but just thinking how different this week's episode is going to be from last week's episode, where we both had so much energy and couldn't shut up.
Yeah.
So
last week's episode was chaotic.
Yes.
This week's episode is sad.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the vibe with our podcast, because I always talk about murder and Kat always talks about something that is usually heavy or less heavy, a little bit lighter. So the mood swings on this podcast are just intense. But
hey, we're here for it.
That's what you signed up for.
It is what it is. It is human nature.
Yes.
But continue.
Let's talk about human nature and how things are. The Columbine High School Massacre was one of the first school shootings in America to get widespread media attention. It wasn't the first school shooting at all, by far, in America, because school shootings are pretty prevalent in America. But there was just something about Columbine that a lot of media outlets picked it up, and it was talked about for a long time. It's still talked about to this day. And it has, unfortunately, become the blueprint for many of the school shootings that we see today. And it has inspired quite a few copycats and other icky stuff. So, on April 20th in 1999, 12th grade students Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold murdered 12 students and one teacher at Columbine High School in Colorado. 10 of those students were murdered in the library, where Harris and Klebold eventually took their own lives. 21 additional people were injured by gunshots, 3 people were injured trying to escape, and shots were exchanged with the police. At the time, it was the deadliest mass shooting at a high school in the United States, and it was eventually surpassed by Stoneman Douglas, the Stoneman Douglas Massacre in Florida in 2018.
That was 2018?
Yeah.
Oh, that seems so much more recent than that. Wow.
Yeah.
Crazy. Okay.
Yeah, there's this YouTuber on YouTube, obviously, who was a teacher at Stoneman Douglas when
Wow.
that happened, and her videos are really, really good. She talks about it a bit. She talks about being an educator after, and before. I don't think she's a teacher anymore, but her name's Brittany something. I can't remember what her channel's called. If
Okay. That's
I
interesting.
remember, we'll put it in the description box. The attack at Columbine had primarily been intended to be a bombing, and the pair had made several homemade bombs. They were going to place them in the cafeteria and set them to detonate during the busiest lunchtime, which was Block A, to cause the most destruction possible. Klebold had done some sort of math or something to figure out that 11:17 a.m. was the busiest time that the cafeteria was going to be. So that's when they were going to detonate these bombs to cause as much death as they could. Their plan was then to shoot and stab as many more students as they could, but I guess maybe thankfully the bombs failed to detonate, with one that was set up in the parking lot as a diversion partially detonating. So the pair launched a shooting attack instead. I say that was maybe a good thing because if these bombs would have gone off, we were looking at hundreds of children dying. And there was 12 deaths as it was, and that is too many. So hundreds would have been awfully awful.
Yeah.
So the two killers were Eric David Harris, who was born on April 9th, 1981 in Wichita, Kansas. His family relocated often as his father was a transport pilot with the Air Force. The Harris family moved from New York to Littleton, Colorado in July of 1993 when his father retired from the military service. Harris spent a lot of his time writing diaries and making video recordings of himself, like video diaries. An overwhelming piece of content in these diaries was that Harris felt immense resentment towards his father for making them move around so often, causing Harris to have to go to multiple different schools. He states in these videos that he was often bullied due to a cosmetic deformity that he had in his chest that caused a slight sunken-in appearance. While Harris was in 7th grade, he met Klebold, and in 1996, the Harris family purchased and settled down at a house just south of Columbine High School. Harris's older brother, Kevin, attended college at the University of Colorado. Harris's father took a job with Flight Safety Services Corporation, and Harris's mother, who was a homemaker, became a caterer. Harris entered Columbine High School in 1995 as a freshman. Columbine had just gone through a major renovation and expansion. From all accounts, he had many friends and was left forward and midfield on the Columbine soccer team for his freshman and sophomore year. According to one of his teammates, who was called Josh Swanson, he said that Harris was a solid soccer player who enjoyed the sport a lot. Harris was known for playing practical jokes, one that it was called a practical joke, although I don't really think it's funny. He pretended to commit suicide when a girl he took to homecoming decided that she didn't want to be with him anymore.
Holy shit.
He covered himself in fake blood and keeled over in the parking lot of their school. He thought it was hilarious. His friends thought it was hilarious. And the girl thought it was traumatizing.
Of course.
So,
That's awful.
Yeah, it's not really very funny either, but...
Not funny at all. That's like,
no.
It's one of those things that you just don't joke about, you know?
Yeah, it's also, like, abusive behavior.
Yeah, totally.
To start, to try and, like, oh, I'm gonna guilt you into being my girlfriend.
Yeah.
By pretending to kill myself. Like, that's gross.
It is, yeah.
So that's Eric Harris. Dylan Bennett Klebold was born on September 11th, 1981 in Lakewood, Colorado to Thomas and Sue Klebold. Like, it struck me, I suppose, that September 11th obviously is 9/11, and that was in 2002, 2001?
2001, yeah.
2001, when that terrorist attack happened in New York. And I think it's I don't really know what the word is, but the fact that Dylan Klebold was born September 11th and did this whole icky thing and died before September 11th really became like a thing. That he had this whole life and a whole thing that happened before September 11th was like a date that became a thing, you know?
Yeah, it is weird. I don't know what the word for it would be either, but like...
No. I think it's weird that people have lives before things happened. Like, the people that died on Titanic would have no idea about the Great Wars.
Yeah.
Like, I just think that
is weird.
I mean, obviously that's what time is, but like, I don't know. I don't know.
I get you. I know what you mean.
Anyways, so on the day after the shooting, Klebold's mother remembered that shortly after his birth, she described what felt like a shadow had been cast over her, warning her that this child would bring her great sorrow. I think I still make of it what I did at that time. It was a passing feeling that went over very quickly, like a shadow, is what she was quoted as saying.
That's weird. That
really is weird. His parents were sort of hippies. They met when they were both studying art at Ohio State University, and they got married in 1971, with their first child, Byron, being born in 1978. Thomas had initially worked as a sculptor, but then moved over to engineering so that he could financially support the family better.
As you do.
Sue had worked in assistance services with disabled children. Furthermore, Klebold's parents were pacifists and attended a Lutheran church with their children. Both Klebold and his older brother attended confirmation classes in accordance with Lutheran tradition. As had been the case with his older brother, Klebold was named after a renowned poet, Dylan Thomas. The family also observed some rituals from Klebold's maternal grandfather's Jewish heritage.
Interesting.
According to reports, Klebold was exceptionally bright as a young child, although he appeared somewhat sheltered in elementary school. When he transitioned to Ken Carroll Middle School, he found it very difficult. Fellow classmates recalled Klebold being painfully shy and quiet, often to an uncomfortable degree. His parents were unconcerned with the fact that he was this shy and found the changing of schools to be difficult, as they assumed it was just regular behavior among young adults.
Yeah.
Both Harris and Klebold, they met in 7th grade, and they both worked together as cooks at Blackjack Pizza, a mile south of Columbine High School. Harris was eventually promoted to shift leader there. He and his group of friends were interested in computers and were enrolled in a bowling class. Some described Harris as charismatic, and others described him as nice and likable. Harris also often bragged about his ability to deceive others by stating in a tape that he could make anyone believe anything. By his junior year, Harris was known to be quick to anger and threatened people with bombs. Classmates also related that Harris was fascinated by war and wrote out violent fantasies about killing people he did not like. Klebold was described by his peers and adults, again, as painfully shy. He was often fidgety whenever someone new talked to him, rarely opening up to people. He was also exceptionally nervous in front of the opposite sex, sometimes avoiding a confrontation with girls altogether. In the last year of his life, many noted a change in Klebold's behavior. He became short-tempered, often prone to sudden outbursts of anger.
Which could totally just be an average teenager.
Right? Yeah.
Like, that's not that uncommon that people should have immediately been concerned, right?
No, it was just something that people mentioned about both of them, actually, that in the last year of their life, they both became short-tempered and angry.
Yeah.
But they were 17, 18-year-old boys, so
yeah,
that, again, not really.
not that weird.
No. It probably didn't raise any red flags for people, and there's no reason that it should have.
Yeah. Also, side note, but anger is a really common symptom of anxiety and depression, especially in men.
So. Yes, that's not surprising to me that it's especially in men, because other symptoms of anxiety like crying and being afraid are not socially acceptable for men. So
yes, yeah. The patriarchy. Doesn't it all come back to the patriarchy?
It all comes back to fucking the patriarchy. Gender roles and forcing people to be who they are not is at a root cause of so many problems that we have.
It really is. Yeah. I showed I sent the link to the podcast to one of my coworkers from the last episode, and he was talking about how he was just like listening along, and then we got on that little capitalism rant, and he was like, "Hell yeah!"
I love capitalism rants.
Hey G, if you're listening.
Hey. As the years went on, Eric and Dylan's anger and resentment grew. They often talked about their desire to get revenge on those who had wronged them and fantasized about committing acts of violence. They began to experiment with homemade explosive and weapons, and even created a website where they posted disturbing content and outlined their plans for the massacre. On the morning of April 20th, 1999, Eric and Dylan put their plan into action. They arrived at Columbine High School armed with guns, explosives, and a desire to kill. They began shooting indiscriminately, targeting anyone that they could find. So there is a specific timeline. It's all very very well documented because the school did have cameras. And the timeline is just really long. So this part is like a little confusing, I think. But just hold in, hang in there. So the first student to be shot was, her name was Rachel, and she was sat outside of the school eating lunch with a friend, and she was shot and killed. There was other students that were shot outside of the school. None of those were killed. An overwhelming tactic that a lot of these students employed, which is really fucking sad, is that they pretended to be dead. A few students mentioned the majority of the massacre happened in the library, and that's where 10 of the 12 victims were shot. A lot of students in the library talked about putting their friends' blood on them and pretending that they were also dead. And this was a high school, so the oldest these kids were 18, and the youngest they were 14. And that's just really icky.
It's horrible.
Mm-hmm. So what they did is they went through the school, and they started their shooting in the cafeteria, and then made their way into different classrooms and different wings of the school. One of the, prominent places that something icky happened was in the science wing. This was close to the cafeteria. So what was happening in the cafeteria is that a teacher called William David Sanders was escorting students out of the cafeteria and working with the two janitors to secure as much of the school as they could. And while he was escorting some students out, they encountered Harris and Klebold, and William Sanders took the entirety of the bullets that were shot at them. He was shot in the neck and in the back, and the students that he was escorting were not harmed. They actually made their way out of the door that he was taking them through. William Sanders was pulled into the science classroom by another teacher and the students that were hiding in the science classroom. They went to get another student called Aaron Hansey, who had knowledge of first aid. He performed first aid on William David Sanders for 3 hours with the help of another teacher and another student.
Oh my God.
Unfortunately, he would not survive, but that is nothing to do with the students. Actually, there was a lot of criticism in this case surrounding the police and their reaction to this, and we talk about it a bit later, but William Sanders was left in a supply room after waiting on paramedics and died there. So Aaron Hansey...
He was alive when the police took over, basically, the situation.
Yes. Aaron Hansey, a high school student, kept him alive for 3 hours. And then he died waiting for official, quote-unquote, medical attention.
Jesus Christ.
Yes. The librarian, her name was Patty Nielsen, called 911 at 11:25, and in this call, she can be heard urging students in the library to take cover underneath the desks. At 11:29 a.m., Harris and Klebold entered the library. 52 students, 2 teachers, and 2 librarians were inside. Harris yelled at everyone to get up loudly enough to be heard on the 911 call. When no one complied, Harris yelled, quote, "Fine, I'll start shooting anyway." Throughout the massacre in the library, they ordered everyone to get up and said how long they had been waiting for this and really seemed to be enjoying themselves, shouting things like, "Woo," after shooting. While ordering the jocks to stand up, one of the 2 said, quote, "Anybody with a white hat or a sports emblem on it is dead." Wearing a white baseball cap at Columbine was a tradition among sports team members. Nobody stood up, and several students were seen trying to hide their white hats. The majority of the massacre happened in the library. The victims here were Kyle Velasquez, Stephen Kernow, Cassie Bernal, who Harris said peekaboo to before shooting her in the head, Isaiah Scholes, Matthew Ketchter, Lauren Townsend, John Tomlin, Kelly Fleming, Daniel Mauser, and Corey DePuta. Harris and Klebold were enjoying themselves immensely and are quoted as saying things such as, quote, "I didn't know black brains could fly that far. Who is ready to die next?" And dismissed a pair of young girls hiding under a table as pathetic. An acquaintance of the 2 shooters, John Savage, asked what they were doing, to which Klebold responded, quote, "Oh, just killing people." Savage asked if they were going to kill him too, to which Klebold said no and told him to run. He did, and he escaped through the main entrance and through the cafeteria. As he fled, Daniel Mauser, who was 15, retaliated to being hit by Harris by either shoving a chair at him or grabbing onto his leg, and he was shot at close range and died instantly. When the 2 shooters left the library, students there who were able to escape or began to escape through an emergency exit. One student, his name was Craig Scott, and he was Rachel Scott's younger brother, Rachel being the first victim, carried another student named Casey Rugsegger, who was shot in the shoulder and hand out of the library. This saved her life. She would have bled out if not for Craig. Craig was, I think, 15, maybe 16. 2 students called Patrick Ireland, who was unconscious, and Lisa Cruitt, who was unable to move, stayed in the library. Patty Nielsen crawled into a break room and hid in a cupboard. The shooters then spent time wandering the school, shooting randomly into walls and ceilings, and as the students and teachers hid, returning to the library, they exchanged a few more shots with police through the windows. No one was injured in this. By 12:08 p.m., both shooters had killed themselves. Harris had sat down with his back to a bookshelf and shot himself through the roof of his mouth, while Klebold went down on his knees and shot himself through the left temple. So, that's what happened. There is a lot more detail on that, like the actual shooting and the massacre and everything online, but I just feel like it doesn't matter. Like, it was horrific and we don't need to go over it again. While all of this was happening, the media, the news, they had access to the CB radios that the police were using, so they knew that something was happening at Columbine High School.
Yeah.
So the parents did, because they were broadcasting the fact that something is going on and shots have been fired and SWAT's coming and everything. So parents and families of students and staff were asked to gather at nearby Leawood Elementary School to await information. All students, teachers, and school employees were taken away, questioned, and offered medical care in small holding areas before being bused to meet with their family members at the elementary school. Some of the victims' families were told to wait on one final school bus that never actually came because their children were dead. Patrick Ireland, who was in the library, had been shot, not fatally, but in like his head region.
Okay.
So he had regained and lost consciousness several times after being shot by Klebold. He was paralyzed on his right side, but he managed to crawl to the library windows where, on live television at 2:38 p.m., he stretched out the window, intending to fall into the arms of two SWAT team members standing on the roof of an emergency vehicle, but instead they let him fall directly onto the vehicle's roof. He became known as the boy in the window. The team members, Don Kramer and John Ramoniak, were later criticized for allowing Ireland to drop more than 7 feet to the ground while doing nothing to try and ensure he could be lowered to the ground safely or to try and break his fall.
Fuck.
Mm-hmm. And this was at 2:38 p.m. And the shooting inside the school had been stopped by 12:05.
And the perpetrators were dead.
And they were dead, yeah. Which police and SWAT wouldn't know necessarily, but a shot had not been fired since 12:08. And it's 2:38. At 12:15 p.m., students placed a sign in the window that said "one bleeding to death" in order to alert police and medical personnel of Sanders in the science room. Police initially feared it was a ruse by the shooters, so they did not go in. A shirt was also tied to the doorknob, and at 2:30 this was spotted, and by 2:40 SWAT officers evacuated the room of students and called for a paramedic. Hansey and Starkey, who were the two students who were administering first aid, were reluctant to leave Sanders behind. By 3 o'clock, the SWAT officers had moved Sanders to a storage room, which was more easily accessible for paramedics. As they did so, the paramedic arrived and found Sanders had no pulse. He had died of his injuries in the storage room before he could receive medical care. He was the only teacher to die in the shooting. Hansey and Starkey had kept him alive for over 3 hours. Lisa Kruitz, who was shot in the shoulder, arms, hand, and thigh, remained laying in the library. She had tried to move but became lightheaded. She kept track of the time by the sound of the school's bells until police arrived. Kruitz was finally evacuated at 3:22 p.m., along with Patty Nielsen, Brian Anderson, and the 3 library staff who had hidden in the rooms adjacent to the library. Officials found the bodies in the library by 3:30. By 4 o'clock, Sheriff John P. Stone made an initial estimate of 25 dead students and teachers, 50 wounded, and referred to the massacre as a, quote, suicide mission, On April 21st, the next day, by 8:30 a.m., the official death toll of 15 was released. These were Cassie Bernal, who was 17, Stephen Cronau, who was 14, Corey DePuta, who was 17, Kelly Fleming, 16, Matthew Ketchter, 16, Daniel Mauser, 15, Daniel Rawborough, 15, William Dave Sanders, 47, Rachel Scott, 17, Isaiah Scholes, 18, John Tomlin, 16, Lauren Townsend, 18, and Kyle Velasquez, 16. In the days following the shootings, Rachel Scott's car and John Tomlin's truck became memorials, and impromptu memorials were held in Clement Park, which was near the school. On April 30th, carpenter Greg Zanis erected 15 6-foot-tall wooden crosses to honor those who had died at the school. Daniel Rawborough's father cut down the 2 meant for the gunman. There were also 15 trees planted, and he cut down 2 of those as well. 6 months after the shootings, Anne-Marie Hochschlacher's mother committed suicide. Anne-Marie had been paralyzed in the shooting. Several former students and teachers were also diagnosed with PTSD. Greg Barnes, a 17-year-old student who had witnessed Sanders' shooting, committed suicide in May 2000. Survivor Austin Eubanks was injured during the shooting, became heavily medicated, developing an opioid addiction. He eventually overcame this and began speaking publicly about the addiction in schools and how he, overcame it. He unfortunately died from an accidental overdose in 2019 at the age of 37. So, police were criticized for a seemingly very slow response to all of this happening.
Yeah.
The first police officers arrived on the scene at 11:26 a.m., and the first call was received at 11:19 from a citizen reporting an explosion in a field, which was the first bomb that had been set off almost like a test by the shooters.
Yeah. That was the parking lot one?
Yes.
Yeah.
The first police officers who arrived on scene were on motorcycles, and they had been giving a parking ticket in the area. The first victim, Rachel Scott, was killed at about 11:19, and SWAT team members were not given an order to enter the school until 11:52, but they didn't enter until 1:09 p.m.
Why?
I don't know. I guess there was a lot. The first 2 officers didn't know what was happening. They had a school resource officer who had a gun, and he had exchanged shots with the 2 shooters.
Wow.
So they knew that there was students on the premises because he had radioed for help. They knew that there was students or people on the premises dressed in all black with guns and duffel bags full of something. I don't really know why the police were so slow to respond.
Yeah.
They thought that Rachel Scott had passed out originally, but I mean, it was pretty obvious that that wasn't the case if you got even slightly close to her.
Yeah.
And as well as her friend being with her that she was having lunch with, who would have said that no, she didn't just pass out, she was shot.
Yeah. And you'd think, especially because she would be outside, right, in the open, that would be, you would think, fairly safe for the police to approach, or for paramedics to approach, to at least check it out.
Yeah, for police to approach, yeah.
Yeah.
You would,
even if she was just passed out, right? Because that is still a medical emergency. Yeah,
right? I don't really know why it was so slow. I suppose you could argue that nothing like this there had been school shootings before, but this one was on a scale that had never been seen before.
Yeah.
So I suppose you could say that they didn't really know what to do, but I'm pretty sure cops are trained to protect people. So I'm not entirely sure why they didn't going up to her and seeing, oh, this woman has been shot. She's outside of a school, and we can hear shots being fired in the school. Like,
Yeah.
I think maybe I'm biased because I think if I went to school in America, the idea of a school shooting would not be the last thing I thought of if something like this was happening,
Right.
which is really unfortunate. But I don't think it would be too difficult to make the connections that something with a gun is happening inside the school and people are probably dying.
Right. And it's kids. Like,
Yeah, it's kids.
there's very few adults in the school, and kids are.
Yeah.
I mean, adults really aren't necessarily equipped to handle a situation like that, but 14-year-olds especially are not.
Absolutely not. Yeah. So, in the immediate aftermath, conspiracy theories and unfounded claims were made by several anti-government movements and extremist religious and political movements, such as the Westboro Baptist Church
Ugh.
and televangelist Jerry Falwell Sr. Westboro's founder and then leader Fred Phelps unfoundedly claimed that both Harris and Klebold were gay, saying, "Two filthy F slurs slaughtered 13 people at Columbine High." Falwell also claimed that Harris and Klebold were gay, although he retracted that afterwards.
The Westboro Baptist Church needs to fuck off forever.
Yeah.
Horrible,
like literally
horrible,
nobody wants
horrible,
them.
Horrible. Yeah.
It's also not Christianity.
No.
Like you can interpret the Bible in many ways, but hatred is not in there. It's literally love thy neighbor as if they are thyself or whatever.
Yeah.
And that, I don't know, you'd have to be doing some pretty extreme mental fucking gymnastics to interpret that as any other way than, be nice to people.
Be nice to people. Yep.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Conspiracy theories also arose from anti-gun control activists and extremists, claiming that the massacre had even been staged, or that both Harris and Klebold had been government agents aiming at promoting tougher gun control legislation. Other conspiracy theories.
The NRA need to just calm the fuck down. Also.
I feel like it would be so fucking ridiculous to believe, the American government is not a government that a lot of people have faith in, right?
Sure.
But I'm pretty sure that your government would have to be insane to think that shooting guns at children is a good way to push any kind of narrative ever. Because it's always going to, even if your narrative is, oh, we need to make schools safer because you're still killing kids.
You're not accomplishing the goal. I also think that there's a lot of mental gymnastics that goes into believing that your Second Amendment rights are more important than people's lives.
Yes, rather.
Sure, people can have guns for specific reasons, but hey, you don't probably need a semi-automatic or automatic rifle designed to literally murder people and to murder people alone. You don't need a military rifle in your home.
You really don't. And also, people who enjoy the Second Amendment also seem to forget that it was written in the 1600s. Yeah. Actually, probably later than that, but it was written when guns took 5 minutes to load and shoot.
Yeah.
And
when, shortly after American independence happened, which was accomplished by a militia. So they were kind of just hey, guns served us well here, so maybe we should just continue to use them.
I also think a lot of people, Americans, we should just call this Sinister Sisters hating on Americans for 25 minutes straight, because it's all we ever talk about on this podcast is how American systems are failing people.
Yeah. But hey, the Americans are our primary audience, so hey guys.
Hey. But I think what a lot of people don't understand is that a lot of the like most commonly quoted amendments are designed to be protection for people against the government. Like, it's your right to bear arms so that the government can't overtake you and like cause you to do things that you don't want to do or take your land or whatever. The freedom of speech is protection from talking out against the government. You can say what you want about the government. Freedom of speech is not protecting you from consequences for calling your neighbor a racial slur. Like, it's not that. It's protection for the people against the government is what these two specifically are.
Yeah.
So I feel like if it's your right to bear arms so the government doesn't come and be tyrannical, why are you taking them to school? Why are you carrying them like with you all the time? Why can you get one when you're 15 or something? Like, why are children having access to things that is meant to protect states from the government interference?
Yeah.
I don't know.
You do have to be 18 to buy a gun, just to fact check that for you. I'm pretty sure in most US states. I could be wrong.
It would make sense, yeah.
I suppose, but 18-year-olds still do not have fully formed frontal lobes, and so they don't have fully formed decision-making and problem-solving capabilities. You don't until you're like 25, 26, so...
I feel like even grown-up adults who are fully formed frontal lobes should not have access to military-style, what are they called? Guns. I don't think it's necessary because human nature is unpredictable.
Sure.
And if you could be the calmest person and have as much training as people do and still accidentally, quote unquote, kill somebody in a road rage incident because your gun was there and you made a split-second decision.
Yeah.
Right? Like, literally, I don't understand.
Also, there's like really no other countries in the world with such lax gun laws, and there's not. I mean, this might be controversial depending on what your opinion on governments at the moment are, but there isn't really any countries, barring a handful, that are experiencing tyrannical governments right now, and we didn't need guns to accomplish that, you know?
Yeah. I don't know about governments because I don't know, but like, we live in Canada and there's been less than 20 school shootings in Canada ever.
Yeah.
And Canada and America are not that much different, especially like the prairie provinces and the southern provinces. There's a lot of the same, like, or southern states, I guess. There's a lot of the same kind of thought processes, like racism and very like nationalist ideas, I guess.
Yeah.
And we're still not having children dying at school in Canada.
Yeah.
Anyways, another conspiracy theory was that there was a third shooter, but this person has never been identified and doesn't really have any backing for this conspiracy anyways. I don't like, the school had cameras and they were not seen on any of these cameras, and the victims and people who were actually there have not said anything about a third shooter, so I don't really know. There was also some anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, of course, because Klebold's mother's family had Jewish ties. Gross.
That's so distant, though. Like, even if it was,
and
obviously it wasn't, but even if it was something related to being Jewish, that's such a distant connection that it doesn't even matter.
Yeah, I think technically, because Jewishness, like the Jewish religion, is passed down through the mother. So if
Oh.
Klebold's grandma was Jewish, then his mum would be, and so then he would also be,
Ooh.
I think. But they
I didn't know that.
identified themselves as Lutheran.
Yeah.
So, and it's just gross.
It is, yeah.
Political commentator and conspiracy theorist Alex Jones, once implied that the US government had, quote, perpetrated Columbine and had claimed that, quote, the Columbine school shootings were 100% a false flag. I think Alex Jones can go fuck himself.
Last November 2022, Alex Jones was ordered to pay hundreds of millions of dollars to the victims of the Sandy Hook shooting for calling Sandy Hook shooting a hoax.
That's the guy.
Yeah.
That's the guy. Sandy Hook elementary school, if you don't know, was a mass shooting at an elementary school, and 20-some, I think, like 6-year-olds died.
Yeah. 26,
It was,
I want to say.
oh, it was kids. I saw a TikTok the other day, and a girl there was somewhat recently a mass shooting at Michigan State University.
Yeah.
And a girl that had survived Sandy Hook when she was in elementary school also had to go through this mass shooting at Michigan State. So this was a 20-something-year-old woman who has now lived through 2 mass shootings at school.
That is horrible.
Yeah, it's pretty fucked. But no, there's absolutely not a gun control problem in America. Guns don't kill people, you guys. Guns don't kill people.
Guns don't kill people. People kill people.
Yeah.
With guns.
With guns that are very easily accessible to them. Bro, we are on a tangent today. In the aftermath of Columbine, investigators uncovered a wealth of evidence that shed light on Eric and Dylan's motives and mindset. They discovered that the 2 young men had been planning the massacre for months and had even created a detailed map of the school's layout. They also found journal entries and videos in which Eric and Dylan expressed their anger and resentment towards their peers, the school, and society as a whole. The FBI concluded that the killers had mental illnesses, that Harris was a clinical psychopath, and Klebold had depression. Dwayne Fusilier, the supervisor in charge of the Columbine investigation for the FBI, would later remark, quote, I believe Eric Harris went to the school to kill and didn't care if he died, while Dylan Klebold wanted to die and didn't care if others died as well. End quote.
Interesting.
There was a lot of ideas batted around as to why this happened, from the idea that Harris was on medication that exacerbated his aggressiveness. The pair were bullied, they were isolated and rejected by peers, that they were Nazis and wanted to make a political statement, and even that Marilyn Manson had influenced the killers with his music and his outspoken attitude. Video games were blamed too, of course, with parents of some of the victims filing several unsuccessful lawsuits against video game manufacturers. Both of them played different types of video games, but most of the video games that they played were first-person shooters.
Yeah, but so does everybody else.
I think was Doom 1 and 2 was mentioned a lot, and also Duke Nukem 3D. Following the Columbine shooting, schools across the United States instituted new security measures such as see-through backpacks, metal detectors, school uniforms, and security guards. Some schools implemented the numbering of school doors in order to improve public safety response. Several schools throughout the country resorted to requiring students to wear computer-generated IDs. Schools also adopted a zero-tolerance approach to possession of weapons and threatening behavior by students, why wasn't that a zero-tolerance approach anyways? Why are you allowed to possess weapons on campus?
Weapons is a broad category, to be fair.
Yeah, but, like, guns, knives, like, nunchucks, whatever they're called, none of those things are necessary at school. Like, I don't care if you collect knives and you display them in your home, but why are you bringing it to school? You know? Like, bring your backpack, and that's it. Calculator and a pencil. Despite the effort, several social science experts feel the zero-tolerance approach adopted in schools has been implemented too harshly, with unintended consequences creating other problems. Despite the safety measures, I think one of the most common that I saw mentioned was the see-through backpacks for young menstruating people. Where do you... Because when you're in high school, you're not, like, maybe as comfortable with your period. So with a see-through backpack, where do you keep your tampons?
Yeah.
Or pads or whatever you are using. That's one of the most commented on
I can see
consequences that I saw.
Yeah.
Yeah. Despite the safety measures that were implemented in the wake of the tragedy at Columbine, school shootings continued to take place in the United States, including at Virginia Tech, Sandy Hook Elementary School, Stoneman Douglas High School, and Robb Elementary School. Some schools renewed existing anti-bullying policies, and Rachel's Challenge was started by Rachel Scott's parents and lectured schools about bullying and suicide. The shooting resulted in more calls for better gun control measures. The gun show loophole and background checks became a focus of national debate. The gun show loophole is a political term in the United States referring to the sale of firearms by private sellers, including those done at gun shows, that do not require the seller to conduct a federal background check of the buyer. 2 or 3 of the guns that were used by Harris and Klebold in this massacre were bought by a friend from a gun show.
So you can go to a gun show, which presumably happened relatively frequently because there seems to be quite like a culture around firearm possession, owning.
Yeah.
So you go to a gun show and you can just come home with a gun.
Yep.
No background check.
No background check.
That makes no sense.
Mm-hmm. It's fucking ridiculous. Like, that should never be a thing.
No.
I don't understand.
Yep.
The Columbine Massacre also led to the My Last Shot project, which was created by students from Columbine High School in 2019. And it involves students placing stickers on their driver's license, student IDs, or phones that states their wishes to have the graphic photos of their bodies publicized if they die in a shooting. The idea is that it will show lawmakers and other people in power the absolute devastation of gun violence and to remind people that America has not changed its position on gun control in decades.
That is horrendous.
There's people who are against this project saying that it will just desensitize people to seeing gun violence or the aftermath of gun violence. But I think if you could ever become desensitized to a picture of a child dead at school, that's a you problem, not like a societal problem.
Yeah. That's actually like good for them for making a stand and, you know, putting pressure for what they believe in. But that is horrible that children have to have had those thoughts and made that decision, applied for the sticker or picked the sticker up or whatever and put it on their ID. The fact that that's even on the mind of someone, anyone, but the mind of a child.
Are we ready? Oh, we're ready. We
had some technical difficulties, but we're back. We're better than ever.
Difficulties, we're back. So, another thing that changed after Columbine was that police departments reassessed their tactics and have since trained for Columbine-like situations after criticism over the slow response and progress of the SWAT teams during the shooting. The sheriff at the time did not seek re-election after this happened, but police followed a traditional tactic at Columbine, which was to surround the building, set up a perimeter, and contain the damage. That approach has been replaced by a tactic known as the immediate action rapid deployment tactic. This tactic calls for a team to advance into the site of any ongoing shooting, but even with just a single officer, if more are not available.
Jeez.
In fact, the majority of active shooters are stopped by a single officer.
Really?
Police officers using this tactic are trained to move towards the sound of gunfire in formation and neutralize the shooter as quickly as possible. There has been widespread adoption of high-strength body armor and patrol rifles by police departments across the United States in response to the increased active shooter threat. The goal is to stop the shooter at all costs. They are to walk past wounded victims, as the aim is to prevent the shooter from killing and wounding more. The active protocol has proved successful in numerous shootings. At Virginia Tech alone, it probably saved dozens of lives.
Wow.
That's a direct quote from a police dude. Dozens of massacres have been based off of Columbine, and the perpetrators are worshipped by many people online. They have dedicated Tumblr fandoms. Like, people write fan fictions about them. They create fan art. It's like a whole gross community. And 68 mass shootings worldwide have had some tie to Columbine since it happened, either by outright copying it, or as part of their motive, or written in their manifestos, or just their online presence kind of gearing them towards worshipping these two killers.
That is awful.
Yeah, it's really gross.
The internet can truly be a magical place, but it also has some really disturbing corners.
Yeah. It kind of lets people be whatever they want to be.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing in some senses, but really kind of terrible in others.
Yeah. Dangerous in others.
Dangerous, yeah. Yeah. That's my whole episode.
Wow. Good to talk about. I actually, obviously I knew that it happened, but didn't really know much of the detail around it. So, horrible.
Yeah.
I'm feeling very sad now.
It's horrible that it's still a thing.
Yes. I think that's
Like,
probably, obviously, things happen and people do some absolutely abhorrent shit sometimes. But usually,
yeah.
governments and whatever police forces are able to make changes because of said abhorrent shit. But
Yeah.
obviously not the case here.
Nothing has really changed regarding guns and schools and kids in Canada. In America, which
also sort of
kind of gross.
Yeah. And then all those kids died for no reason.
Yeah. Yeah. Because lawmakers are just letting it happen over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Is it really more important that you have the ability to own a gun than it is to have kids see their whole lives? No. It shouldn't be more important than that you have access to a gun.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. But I'm sure the folks gathered that by our 25-minute long rant in the middle of this episode on American policies.
Yes. I think it's so extra icky because if you're a person that lives in the West, you've been to school, and you know what it's like. And so you can, I don't know, but I can very easily put myself in the shoes of, obviously I don't know what it physically would feel like or what it would, like, the emotions and everything, but I can imagine it happening.
Mm-hmm. You're empathetic to it.
Yeah. I've seen so many videos of people in America, like fireworks going off and kids diving under tables, and I saw a video of this lady who, she's like, I just spent $350 on a bulletproof backpack because the $250 one didn't protect against assault rifles or something like that. I'm like, hello?
Holy
A kid was in
shit.
elementary school. They should be thinking about who they're going to ask to the Valentine's Day dance.
Or should be
Not
purchasing a unicorn sparkly backpack or a backpack with Paw Patrol on it.
Yeah, whatever's the cutest.
Yeah.
Whatever their heart desires, not what's going to keep them protected from guns.
And unhinged adults.
Yeah.
It's also, I think,
Yeah.
to me, like, it really shows how vital and beautiful and wonderful teachers are on, like, obviously there's bad teachers out there, but broad strokes, teachers are wonderful, because it seems like a theme that in these incidents that teachers will put themselves in the line of fire to protect the kids. And so how do you
and do so much.
Yeah.
Like they pull fire alarms and escort students out of doors, and like that is not their job description.
No.
Shouldn't be anybody's job description, but like,
on top of all the
you shouldn't be
beautiful day-to-day things that they spend their own money on and work so hard to build beautiful learning opportunities for, our world's future.
Yep.
But hey, let's pay them peanuts and overwork them and not staff appropriate support staff in classrooms anymore, so that the burnout rate for teaching is immense and there's none left. None of those good guys left.
Yeah, and then we'll really see the how fucked society gets from there when there's not enough people to teach.
Yep. Education and the truth are key to us getting better as a global society. Yep.
And also not just teachers, but like school staff in general. Janitors and the people in the library and the, I don't know, school bus drivers.
Support staff, school counselors, guidance counselors, etc., etc.
Schools should just be a place of education and expanding one's own personness. And instead they're, in America at least, they are places that have been built on fear. And they've been designed around fear. I saw a TikTok of a lady having going through this training on, she had this little, it was like a movable room inside of her classroom that came out from one corner, and it created like a smaller room inside, but it was bulletproof.
I saw that too. It was like a panic, basically like a portable panic room.
So instead of that space being utilized for, I don't know, finger painting or
books, art,
learning how to write, art, or even posters that help with math or whatever it is, like, it has to be used for protecting the lives of probably society's most innocent people.
People who have never done anything intentionally to hurt another person, because they are not yet.
And they deserve so much better.
They do. They really do.
6-year-olds deserve so much better.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, that is our episode today. Thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you.
If you want to find more Sinister Sisters, all of the information on where that you can find us will be in the description or the show notes, or everywhere else that it usually is.
All the places.
All the places.
And catch us next week for your weekly episode of Sinister Socialism. And hopefully we'll be less doom and gloom.
We hope.
We hope. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening.